Hi there, welcome back to the Great Collection Unboxing. We're on box number 31, if you can believe it, of a wonderful collection that I purchased. So this week we have Breyer Mustangs, Ruby and Wildfire set, and some wildlife. So this should be an interesting mixed box. So let's, ooh, this one looks fun. This is the Breyer Modernistic Doe. I will have to do a video on the Breyer Modernistic Buck and Doe sometime. These were sculpted by Don Manning back in the, who knows, probably the 40s. And he made lots and lots of things. These two molds, the Breyer Modernistic Doe and Buck, and we'll see if we come across the Buck, Breyer purchased the rights to. So if you find them in gold, if you find them in silver or clear or this really high gloss metallic gold, they're the Don Mannings. The Breyers actually do have a Breyer Round Molding Company mark on them. So if they don't have the mark, they're not Breyer, they're Don Manning. So this is a really old, really fun piece. And we're coming a little more modern now. This is the Bighorn Ram. I think we've seen a bunch of these over the weeks. This is just the original Bighorn Ram in his original color. He was introduced in the late 60s and run through the 70s. Then they reissued him in the 80s. Very similar color, but you can usually tell if you put them next to each other from the paint application. The horns are molded separately and then put on. So this guy, the left horn, is like touching his neck. It's not a big deal. It's just something to pay attention to. It's not a mold flaw. It's more along the lines of just how the horns were applied. So you will find differences in those. And we have another Bighorn Ram. This guy liked his Bighorn Rams. This guy is definitely much newer. He has a much different, darker paint job than the first guy. There's really not a lot of way to tell the difference between the two and the different issues other than putting them next to each other. His horn is definitely molded a lot, or put on a lot nicer. There's a big gap between it and his neck, and he's just a much nicer, darker, shaded version of the first guy. And this guy, you're surprised, I know, is another Bighorn Ram. Dun da da. So this kind of is a middle color. We've got kind of a tannish brown, kind of a medium, and then a very dark variation. Other than that, they're all very similar. They have the lighter butts, although it doesn't show up as clearly on this guy because he's already light. Do you want to take bets? Are there more Bighorn Rams in here? I think so. Yeah, there's at least one more. But this is the doll sheep, so a little bit of variety. They don't have a ton of choices because the Bighorn Ram only comes in so many colors in real life. I've seen some fantasy colors on him that are really fun, but this is the doll sheep, also made about the same era as the Bighorn Ram. I think he was made a few years less. And he is mostly white with the tan on the horns and a few gray shadings. Really nice. This one has really nice color and shading on him. I'd have to look at another example to tell, but I'm going to say this guy looks a lot newer. He has a lot more detail to his paint job with browns and grays, so I think he's probably a little newer than the other guys. And this is a mountain goat. I think he was produced a little after. I think the Bighorn Ram mold was introduced in the late 60s. This guy was introduced in the early 70s. And again, just from holding a lot of these over the years, I think he's a little newer. His paint on his horns just looks a little more matte and just a little different quality than the old, but I could be wrong. He has very little shading, but a little along his legs and his horns and his head. He was made for a bunch of years, early 70s through late 70s, early 80s. I think that's it for the wildlife, but now we have a wild card. We have a fighting stallion. This guy's really pretty. He's just the common bay fighting stallion made for a lot of years. Whenever you grab a fighting stallion, or whenever I grab one, I just automatically turn them over and look to see if they have hoof pad residue. The ones with the hoof pad, because they originally came with these kind of spongy pads for the hooves. That indicates they're much earlier. He does not have that, so he's a later issue, but he's really pretty. And again, unless I saw him right up next to somebody else, I wouldn't know if he was one of the original issues or one of the Toys R Us special issues, because they were painted so similar. But he's just a really nice bay fighting stallion. And now we get into the Mustangs. Oh, ooh, this one might be a good one. Oh, this is, we had one of these repaints, like in one of the early boxes. This is a not wood grain by Breyer, custom by Janet Davis. So she took one of the Mustangs, and either he was already a dark black or she painted him a dark black and then striped him. Her style of wood grain is not very close to the Breyer. You can tell it's a custom, and her signature is a silver handprint and then JD for Janet Davis. Really, really pretty. The bull that we saw earlier in one of the earlier boxes was just gorgeous, and he's also very attractive in this color. Just a really nice dark wood grain custom, really nice condition. So I love her customs. I have a couple myself, and I'm not a custom collector. Okay, so this is a black Mustang with one hoof. And I should know my Mustangs, so he is, I think, the middle guy, but I can't remember if he's a special run or a regular run. They made 3 so far, mostly black Mustangs. The solid black, which was the original 1978 Model Horse Collectors Congress. And then this guy was, I think, sometime in the 90s. And then they made another one that was solid black, but the paint quality of those two are completely different. So he's pretty easy to tell with this front hoof. And since I have my book right here, I can tell you whether he's a special run or a regular run. There's the one. So he is a 1993 JCPenney Wild Horses of America set. So he's a special run. And a nice piece. There you go. So we have 2 horses left, so I assume this is Ruby and Wildfire. Forgive me, but I don't know which one's which. One's Ruby and one's Wildfire. So this is the Mustang of the set. And this is the other one. So I think this one, he looks like a Ruby to me. Doesn't he look like a Ruby? I think he looks like a Ruby, and this one looks like a Wildfire to me. So that's what I'm going to go with. So this was a set that was issued, not Tractor Supply Company, I think it was like Bentley. They made 1,000 of them, and they're not marked at all. This is the San Domingo mold. This is the Mustang mold. He's in a really dark, shaded chestnut with a lot of the splatter dapple over his belly and his haunches. This is the San Domingo mold, also in a chestnut, but a wild colored pinto. This was pretty ambitious for Breyer back in the day. They didn't do a lot of detailed pintos. So this was a really popular set, and again, this was very early in the Breyer special run, kind of trying things out. So 1,000, particularly before the internet existed, was actually a pretty small run, because a lot of collectors didn't find out about them until after they were sold out. A lot of them went out of the collector community, so they're actually very hard to find, and this set is in very nice condition. He has some paint flaws, but they're original factory paint flaws where they oopsed when they painted him. This guy's in really nice shape. Oh, and he has the splatter dappling all across his front too. So this is a really nice, really rare set. And so that was a really fun box. Hope you enjoyed. And join me next week for another unboxing of gosh knows what I'm going to find in the next box. Thanks.